Welcome to everybody, and welcome to our amazing builders. We're going to go through introductions in a minute, but I'll start by introducing myself. I am Eileen Mulray. I'm here on behalf of the SRAM team. I am the Vice President of Human Resources for SRAM. I am 2 years in the bicycle industry, so still learning, and my first time at the Philly Bike Expo. Really excited to be here. And I'll ask Taylor to introduce herself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Taylor Kirkwhite and I'm representing the Philly Bike Expo on the other side of things. I'm really excited to see this first year scholarship program come together, and I still have a lot to learn from these folks about themselves and about the program. And we're really excited to be in conversation with you all about why a scholarship program like this is so important and kind of can help be a culture influencer for our industry. I've been in bicycles for about 10 or so years in the bike shop side, the bike racing side, and over the last 6 or 7 years mostly in the nonprofit world. So I think we have a really great balance of kind of different perspectives up here, which is exciting.
Absolutely. And we just put together a couple of slides just to kind of keep us on track and make sure we all got the most out of our time together. So I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to our builders here and ask them to introduce themselves. And we've asked them to think about, as you think about your journey and kind of, what got you to where you are today in your profession. What is the rose, right? What is the thing that you are most proud of and you feel really happy about in terms of accomplishments? What is the thorn, maybe something that is a bit of a challenge you're still working on? And then what is the bud? What is the thing that you're really curious about or you're cultivating right now in your art and your science? So with that, I'm going to pull on you, Jackie.
My name is Jackie Mountner. I do Untitled Cycles, and I'm sort of the amateur frame builder amongst the bunch. Let's see, what is my rose? I think my rose is actually this show because it's also my debut, and I'm just so honored to be able to show with the folks that I've looked up to for such a while now, and whose work is really inspiring. And the thorn is trying to build community amongst, kind of across like a geographic location, because I feel like there's very few of us who are not men who are building, and trying to make those connections, to me, is really important. So that sort of leads into the bud of things, which is what I think is important is, and what I look forward to is really developing community, trying to get newer folks into frame building, and trying to brainstorm ways that we can be more supportive and take people under our wing and offer opportunities, because it's a hard profession, and I am sort of shielded because I'm working for another company right now, building bikes, but I have to go out on my own soon, and it's pretty daunting. And all these folks have made that courageous leap of faith and have been doing pretty well, it looks like. So, yeah, that's sort of my quick introduction.
Thank you, Jackie. Danielle?
Hi, I'm Danielle Sean. Sean Studios, based in Squamish, BC, originally from Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. I would say that my rose would be just kind of this whole journey for me of growing as an artist and a fabricator has been super cool. I come from a fine arts background and have kind of backwards worked my way through a technical and trades kind of education and experience, so that's been really exciting and kind of eye-opening for me in the sense of like the skills that I'm able to acquire and the types of work that I like to do and have kind of grown into and figured out over the past many years. The thorn, I would say, is maybe a little bit of the kind of that the business side of it in terms of like frame building and art as a business has always been kind of that mystery to unlock of like what's the best balance and how do you manage. It's so many jobs in one, and I think you can go into it with this really fantastic idea, but you also have to look at it from a really very realistic perspective of you're operating a business, and trying to find that critical balance is really important. So that's something that I've been trying to spend a lot of time like learning and growing on, because I've heard someone say that like frame building is like 10% of what you do, which might be accurate, and then there's the rest of the stuff which is just as critical. So that's I think you probably hear that echoed from a lot of builders, regardless if you're like newer, kind of have been in it a while. And I think the bud would be the harboring of community. Kind of what Jackie said is we're also spread out, and especially if you're doing kind of different types of stuff, it can be hard to find those people that are doing the same things as you. So being able to come together in a situation like this and connect to people who are doing similar work to you and have a similar like vibe and sense of community and want to grow the same things as you, and kind of push for the the same good stuff is really nice, and it's an excellent opportunity. So that's what I'm really excited about for right now for the show and moving forward, and what can kind of come from this.
Hi everyone, I'm Ann Catalano. I build Catalano bicycles. I'm in Kansas City, Kansas. My rose, I think, would be that I've gotten to the point where I've been able to leverage technology with CNC, CAD, and CAM to create art. The first time that I got introduced to that, to the machining world, I just immediately thought like this has so much potential as a form of artistic expression, and I didn't see too much of it out there. So for me, I'm very proud that I'm starting to get to the point where I can do that. My thorn is CNC and CAD and CAM, because it's very complicated. The machinery is very expensive, the software is expensive, there's a huge learning curve, and it's been a struggle to get where I want to be and make the things that I want to make, and I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. And then my bud is, I would love to be able to grow the business and turn it into a full-time gig. Right now it's still part-time, so it would be amazing for it to be able to focus on it 100% of my energy. And I would also, speaking to the community, I think I've had so much fun and felt so creative with the technology. I would love to sort of make that available to other artists and creative people, and I'm not sure what that looks like or how I would do it, but it's a long-term goal of mine where I would be able to work with other artists and help them realize projects so that they don't have to go and invest in all the machinery and the software to do it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Dean. I build Moth Attack. I've been building for a while and been in Philly before, so I'm happy to be back. For me, my rose really has come from I did a lot of moving, and I ended up building bikes for a cross team out of San Francisco, and that really was where I learned what I was absolutely capable of, and it was way more than I thought I ever was. And so it just kind of pushed me from being a very small time custom builder to I can pump out 6 bikes, and it really changed how I did things. And they're all not racing currently because cross is suffering in parts of the country, but it really was just a great project to work on with friends. I worked with my painter, and that's where we learned how to work together. And so my whole current business is based on that very unexpected experience for me. For me, my thorn has actually been injury. I have really bad tendonitis, and so I've had to take steps back and work around that. But the butt of that is that I now have machines that have taken off a lot of my pressure off of my tendons and injury, and so I'm working my way through figuring out mills. But it's really amazing. It's like been a just complete game changer. Like I thought I was gonna have to quit building, and I'm somehow still here.
Thank you. So just a step back, we want this to be conversational, so we are going to kind of pause, and if you have questions, we kind of have at it. So if there's anything that you want to ask the builders at any point, feel free. So I'm going to do one quick kind of commercial about the scholarship. So this is the inaugural class of the Philly Bike Expo SRAM Inclusivity Scholarship. That's a mouthful. We have to work on an acronym or something. And just a little bit about kind of how that got started. And I'm going to talk to the SRAM side of this, which is, we as an organization have been on a journey about improving diversity and inclusion in our workplace, and what do we do to make sure that we are attracting and welcoming all kinds of people to SRAM. And I kind of credit that work with maybe how this got started, and I'm going to point to Brooke Fowler, who's here on behalf of SRAM, and Kate Powlinson, who's not here, and then Bina from Philly Bike Expo. And really those three people kind of connected with a shared mindset around how do we make sure that we are inviting and bringing people into these types of shows. And so Bina had this passion about diversity and inclusion at this show. Brooke and Kate have been thinking about representation and, how do we show up as a brand, and how do we show up with people riding SRAM components. And that's kind of how this all got started. And so as a result of those three amazing people kind of connecting and talking about this topic, we got to meet these four builders and got to award, some financial help and getting them here to Philly, getting them some stuff to put on their bikes, and then, making sure that we could have this amazing conversation with them. So that's a little bit about the backdrop of this scholarship. And again, this is the first year. We're really, I think, we believe in continuous improvement at SRAM, and so one of the things that I'm really looking to is kind of hear experiences and what can we do better next year, because this is not a one and done. This is something that we think as an organization we can help foster a stronger community by doing more of this. So that's the end of the commercial, and back to the people. So I'm going to ask Taylor to maybe kick us off with this next section.
Yeah, I think that didn't sound like a commercial at all. I think it's really important to kind of know the history of why we started this and who the major players in getting it kicked off are. I think from the Philly Bike Expo standpoint, Bina has helped to found the show, is now the owner of the show, and really does an amazing job putting on the show and consulting with a diversity of stakeholders, and making this a welcoming space, and featuring different voices and different artists. And I think that there definitely came a time at the end of each year, we're looking back, we always do a frame builder roundup and frame builder photo. I think there's just been one too many years we look back at the frame builder photo and go, what's going on? They're all old white guys, what is going on? And I think it's important to hold the mirror as much as it is to understand that this culture exists, doesn't exist in a vacuum, that there's a larger social and industry some challenges that we need to work through. So we wanted to make some time during our panel this morning to talk through what are some of those challenges, and what are the values that we hold that make this scholarship important, and I think in that way connect to participating in a longer term culture shift around making sure that there is space for diversity of builders, making sure that there are pathways for anyone to make this their space and their industry. So I just wanted to kind of kick things off. We had a little bit of a discussion prior to the panel to talk through what are some of those values and core pieces that make a scholarship like this important. So if you want to kick it over to the first slide. one of the key things that we discussed is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Jackie, I'm going to kick it over to you to just share a little bit more about why you think that's important in the bicycle industry, and folks want to pitch in and share in on this conversation. That's why we're here.
I think it's first important because I think these three terms are often repeated, sometimes in a performative way, but just to give definitions to them, if that's okay. Diversity is really who is in the room, who is not in the room. In this case, who is on the panel or who is not on the panel. Equity would be how are the folks who are in the room supported in the ways that hopefully comes from more of a justice-oriented framework that prioritizes giving people a leg up who sometimes have a leg down, I suppose. Otherwise, because we don't all start out from the same playing field, and we want to get folks jump-started into this wild world of hand-built frames. And then inclusion is, how do we, it's a little out of order, but how do we get folks into the room in the first place? What are the barriers for folks? Are we reaching out to the right community to find a diversity of folks? And I think with all of these, it's really it's a goal. It's never something that you fully can say, okay, I think we did it, yay us. I think that there are definitely ways that it can improve every time, and I think holding the mirror is something that you do throughout the process as well. So I think given that, I feel it's really important because it's an intimidating profession to take up or to aim for. I think having gone to frame building school at UBI, I was the only trans woman who was there, and it seemed really daunting, regardless of who went to this, to make that next step and build a frame out of school by yourself, essentially. You have folks holding your hand. So there's many steps between learning the craft and learning the skill and learning the basics and getting to a point where you have a sustainable business under your own name or community of builders. And I often dream of sort of forming a collective of folks. So again, it goes back to how do we form a collective that would be diverse and inclusive and equitable, where do we go? What possibilities does that open up then? And I think that's the key, is that we're at a place where we're still working on it, and every time we take a step forward, a new horizon appears and more possibilities appear, and we can start to shift the dominant narrative a bit. So that's sort of my take on that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I think so much, when we reflect on our industry at large, the frame building aspect of it in particular, but the industry at large, I think we all have a lot of work to do. I think sometimes it can be easy to, from the outside looking in, just say, well, what's the problem? Everyone can just sign up for the Expo and, bring a frame that they've built. And I think looking a little bit deeper, at the diversity, equity, inclusion, and talking about, well, is it valuable to us to have a diversity of, work represented? What does that add to the industry? Why is it important to us? If we agree that it's important, what's the difference between everyone having an equal shot at just purchasing an expo space and showing up versus, what are we doing, like you said, to kind of level the playing field? I think that's the difference between equality and equity that we sometimes, fail to recognize and discuss with nuance. Again, I agree with you completely that the inclusion aspect is, once people get to the space, how are we holding, a safe and welcoming environment? So I appreciate having everyone here to, engage in that conversation together, because as much as, SRAM and the Philly Bike Expo and these incredible builders can do all this work to get us most of the way there, if the community as a whole doesn't buy in, we haven't succeeded. All right, we can move on to the next slide. So another value that we discussed, kind of as a whole, that felt really important that the scholarship is helping us get one step closer to, is access. So Julie, I'm going to let you talk about that a little bit.
Are we talking about access in terms of
like accessing the industry? You were talking a little bit about creating pathways, having mentors.
Yeah.
Finding ways
Right.
into the field in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And then being able to kind of get a start from there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge learning curve if you want to do custom bicycles, and even if you take a class, and I think all of us have done that, and then we've all left the class and been like, okay, I've got a file and a tube block and a hacksaw. What next? There's still a lot that I don't know, and there's so much to learn. It's a continuous process of learning. So having the mentors and the people there that you feel safe and comfortable to talk to, like, that's a big thing for me. And it's been such a pleasure to work with Brooke on this, where if I come to her come to them with a technical question about a part, I'm not scared to ask. I know I can approach them and they won't judge me even if I do something really stupid, which I did. It's a safe place, and I can learn and benefit from their knowledge and expertise. So having that in place has been very important for me, and it's been something that I've had a harder time with, especially when I've had wonderful builder mentors and machinist mentors, but the parts aspect of it, it's very scary to me, and I suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome around it. Like, if I show this bike, did I pick the right parts? Is someone going to judge me about this or that, or instead of, so it's great to have that person in your corner backing you up. And then also, sure, I can sign up for the show, but how am I going to get to the show? How am I going to pay for these show bikes? I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, I think we'd all have amazing clients and we just have some bikes ready to go and we just come with the bikes. But that hasn't necessarily lined up every time I've done this. And especially for this one, I did want to do something really special, so that's kind of why. But it's expensive to build these bikes. It takes a lot of time and a lot of care, and the parts builds are expensive, the travel is expensive, the booth setup, all of that time, it's hard. So I've really appreciated this process where I can focus on what I'm good at, which is creativity, and all the logistics of the booth and the travel and all of that has been sorted out for me. Mm-hmm. So I can just roll up with the bike and relax.
Yeah. Game changing.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah. For how stressful it is, like, without having to do all of that additional stuff, it's just like, it removes a lot of significant barriers to have that kind of support.
Absolutely.
And to have it be like encouraging the entire time.
Yep.
And like kind of what Julie said is, like, I asked Brooke 1,000 technical questions and didn't feel like weird or like stupid or like I'm gonna come off as someone who just doesn't know, because sometimes you have those questions and you get that serious imposter syndrome, I think, as like a young woman in this trades orientation. Of going to people who are, have been in the industry forever, and you just don't want to get, like, you feel like you're going to get that extra layer of judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that's happens to a lot of us, and like nobody ever really talks about it, and then you just like go into this weird like headspace about it. Yeah. So then you just don't ask.
Just don't ask. Yeah.
And then you end up think of that, but then for every aspect of it, like, you build the bike and then you do the components and then you got to get here and then you do the booth and like kind of all of that, and you add that you know, maybe it's only like 10 or 15%, but you add that to every single little section.
Yeah.
So by the time you get here, it's like 1,000% additional, and it's like you haven't even started yet. So I think that's really like, it's kind of that little invisible layer that's on top of everything that if you, and I know that if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to explain it in a way that is like consumable, and it's hard to understand it if you haven't experienced it. And I think that maybe is kind of what we're trying to communicate in an actionable manner. Like, we're not trying to sit here and like wag our fingers. We're just trying to sit here and be like, listen, like, this is what it's like, and we're just trying to hang. We're just trying to do the thing that we all love, but please realize that there needs to be additional outside steps taken for everyone to like come and have a good time.
So as you were talking, I just had this image of like, you know, like we think the path is there, but like there's a brick, and this brick is maybe, you know, my head, like these little obstacles that, and then you keep piling those bricks up, like that creates, you know, that barrier, real or perceived, to fully getting in and engaging with this community.
And it's just one little one.
It's just one little one, and
then it's so easy for people to be like, well, you can just show up and do the thing. And it's like, it's just like one little, and it's like, okay, it's one little thing, and that's one little thing,
there's this,
and then you have an entire wall. So it's like, it takes time and work to knock those things out one by one. And like Jackie said, it's a process, and it's never ending, and it's not like I think there's a lot of people who clear one little thing and they're like, we did it, we're done, like we did the thing. And it's like, well, like you took a step, you knocked down like one little thing, but it's a constant growing, evolving, you know, living, breathing thing that I think we all, and even us, like personally, we all need to work on. So
totally.
Yeah.
Anybody in the audience, does that resonate? Any questions or comments? I see some heads nodding.
As speaking as an old white guy, it's hard enough when you have the deck stacked in your favor. So,
right?
bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like such an important piece to just, you know, having a clean path, or, you know, the cleanest possible path is having that mentorship component, having somebody that you can reach out to, you know, knowing someone that's done this before, you know, having people in your community. And it's so interesting to think about the things that, you know, we have such strong community about, and we are trained very well in, and we know who we can reach out to about this and this, and, you know, this is just not a field yet that has that infrastructure. And so I think it feels exciting to me, you know, and relevant to the scholarship that, you know, this was, you know, one wild idea that a group of people had, and just, well, let's just find a way to make it happen this year. But you're building infrastructure so that pathway is cleaner for, you know, folks to come next year. And, you know, Jackie, you've already spoken to folks, you know, on this panel being mentors to you, and, you know, next year it just has that ripple effect that you know, that structure is there so that folks can look at what you've done here, and, you know, have somebody to reach out to and ask, you know, those questions, so those little bricks can just be pushed to the side, and that feels, you know, super powerful and really exciting.
There's something really powerful about getting critical mass, right? When you get the people in the room, and there's more ways to connect and more ways to kind of take those obstacles out of the way. It's super powerful. Please.
So, as we work to get more inclusive for not just women, but you look around this room, it is mostly Caucasian individuals. There's also women who are African American or Latino or Asian, who also might identify as part of the queer community. That's additional layers of barriers. Okay, you're not just a female, it's the intersectionality of you're part of this group and this group and this group. What is being done to flow everything together so that you have the resources to contact individuals from other organizations, be like, I don't have personal experience in this, can you assist me to help this individual out as we work to help them? Like, are you working to get contacts outside of the growth? I guess I'm trying to think of how best to explain this.
I
as we grow, what is being done to look beyond what you're already doing?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and I appreciate you so much for bringing it up. It's definitely something that we discussed, and at what point are we able to grow this scholarship, beyond ourselves? I think that, like you said, there's so many layers, to the oppression in the industry that make it harder for people to have access to this space. So it's definitely a conversation that we've been having, that we want to have as a group, and a big part of coming together is looking forward to what's next, and how do we branch out, and how do we diversify, and how do we bring in folks that aren't white and create pathways and create spaces. And I think that such a tricky part of addressing that is it's not my place as a white person to make those answers. It's my job, our jobs as white people, to create resources and to step down from positions of power and to use our privilege to create pathways and access. And I think it starts with getting more voices at the table. I'm not sure that I have much more of an answer than that, but I'd love to hear from other folks.
I think it's a start. This is kind of, it's the beginning of the critical mass, and I think that this is something that has been quietly brewing for a long time, and this is a lot of feelings that we've all been reflecting in for a long time. And this is kind of the first point where it's come to a head, and we've all been able to sit down and even just start the conversation, because I think it's been something that's been happening in a lot of segmented pockets for a long time, but it really takes that push to start, and then you get that momentum and get rolling and get growing, and you have those further conversations. And I think it's that self-reflection thing, and kind of what I said before is I personally can't know those additional barriers, so it's going to take extra work to try and figure it out, and open the doors for everybody, and make sure that we are critically evaluating and figuring those questions out. And if we can't figure them out ourselves, find the resources and kind of put the word out and push it and spread it, and make sure that it's not stagnant and kicking over the one brick and saying, great, we're done. Yeah. So it's just I think we're just at the tipping point, just at the start, and it's going to take a lot of work and critique and stuff to grow and move forward. So I hope that that's something that we can continue to work on and figure out, but it's a long road and it's a lot of work, and I think that everybody here is committed to not saying one and done and this is it, and this is the face of diversity, because it's not, and being very open and honest about that, and having those questions and conversations, and just trying to make it work and figure it out.
And I think Ayesha McGowan's here. She's been doing great work on kind of reminding us that, representation matters, and, those choices. I think that there's a panel today kind of talking specifically about that. It's something that at SRAM, I think we feel like the work we're doing is leading to better conversations in our organization, and then better connections and better decisions. And that, I think all of those things together start to get some of those barriers out of the way, but it is a journey, and we've got a lot of work to do, and I wish I had an easier answer, but just constantly challenging ourselves to look around the room and say, who's not here and should be here is important.
I do think it's important to say constant, really underline constantly, because everyone who's in the room is probably connected to the bike industry or bicycling in some facet or another, and it is really not a problem specific to frame building. It's also more broadly about the bike industry in general. It's about the culture of bicycles and who is presented as being a cyclist. And it's the dominant narrative in our society as well. The dominant narrative is certainly built on racism, certainly built on sexism, and so we can either be impervious to that, but we also have to be the seeds of change. So it's really up to everyone who's in the room to sort of take that to wherever you are, and sort of like what Taylor is saying is step back, make sure, I think it's really important for access and inclusion that we are, you know, there's no better time than yesterday really to solve, to start to address these problems. And getting folks into the room, you know, we all know each other. We probably each know maybe a handful of other frame builders who occupy other identities than being a white man, but we need to go beyond our own networks, because our own networks are also segregated, and we need to get the word out in the right places so that we can keep making steps towards being the change that we want to see, and hopefully having that ripple effect outwards into the larger conversation, into the larger world. So.
I see this a lot as like customers in frame building. Like, I've built bikes for a lot of people who would not have ever gone down the custom road because they didn't want to deal with a middle-aged white guy who didn't listen to their wants, needs, you know, and so definitely, like, first step, like, I've built bikes for people who don't fully identify with me, but I was like a safe, comfortable place for them to start down that road, and make sure that like everything went the way that they needed it to go. And I think that like if you can identify at least a little bit, like for me, in like growing up and having like a big punk queer community around me, is like a weird access point for a lot of people who hopefully will get further down this like either frame building road or bikes, or like it really is like a weird overlapping thing, but it's just still not big. It's like very, very baby growing right now. And I hope that like this scholarship goes to people who don't look like us next year in some way. And I know we've talked about that, and we've tried to identify who those people could be amongst like, you know, the folks that I've talked to. And I think there's a next step there for sure. We're just the people who are established enough that people know how to find us.
I think touching back on the idea of diversity is the more diversity we have in the industry, the more different voices we have out there talking about what qualifies someone to be a cyclist, who's allowed to have bikes, who's allowed to have nice bikes, what are they allowed to do on it, what qualifies as a cyclist. And I think the broader that definition can get, and the more different voices and ideas we have, the easier it'll be for folks to find us and to be welcomed into the community.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Val.
So I think, you know, in addressing some of these important social issues, as well as, you know, taking a good look at the work that these folks are sharing with us, which I really hope you do after this panel. One of the values that we thought about in relation to how this scholarship is so important is creativity. And I think bringing creativity to how we're addressing these issues, and bringing creativity to the work.
Yeah, I was just, as you were talking, I was just thinking the scholarship is so important because you can't be creative if you're coming from a place of scarcity.
Yeah.
So having all of these things sorted out for me and taken care of for me gave me all that much more energy to work on making something amazing and exploring some interesting ideas.
I think kind of to echo on what you said before as well, is it doesn't always, if you're a small builder and you're not banging out several bikes a month type thing, it's hard to just perfectly align that very eager customer to allow you to have more creative liberties and also just like take their bike to a show, basically fund your show experience, which has happened sometimes and not others. And when it doesn't, it's like, you know, you're building a bike for yourself, or maybe a bike that you hope to sell afterwards, but it's a lot of those upfront costs and whatnot. And that can be an additional layer of stress on just trying to build something creative and that represents you and your work and a showpiece that you want to put out. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity in that regard because it lets people just have a blank, easy canvas to start with none of those like outside factors, and you can just produce something that you really want to represent you. So, yeah, awesome.
Okay. Thank you. Last value.
Yeah, and I think that this has been kind of ringing throughout everything that we've been sharing since introductions, but is the importance about building a community throughout the process that kind of helps all of the other pieces fall into place. Does anybody want to build on that a little bit, or even talk about, we had some ideas about how can we shift this into a movement of building a community that can support other folks in the coming years. Does anyone want to build on that a little bit?
As like the oldest builder, I think, in the room, I think about this a lot as like I've gone through injury and been like, what happens when I can't do this anymore and my body falls apart? Like I have so much that I could like hand off to someone else in terms of like, just my hoarding, but like knowledge. And I've been so fortunate that at the right time, I've always had someone to answer those questions for me. I've had like a very accessible group of like middle-aged old white men who are mostly down on the show floor right now, who have reached out to me and said, hey, do you need something? Which is really amazing. And I know not everyone gets that. I literally just had to hang around long enough that someone noticed, and that it's like kind of been a thing. And for me, a lot of it's like been coming out of my shell and asking questions. Like I built a full suspension mountain bike for this show because I didn't have like all of the blocks of a normal show. Like all of the logistics that would have killed that bike weren't there, but I had to ask so many people so many stupid questions because it was such a huge project to like just throw down and be like, how like, aside from taking apart other bikes. But it's been really amazing to like have those people, and I think it's not very accessible. Like my world is not very accessible to everyone because it's just been very fortunate of sticking around, and I think that's like where we need to move forward is safe spaces to ask really stupid questions. Like we just like there's really a lot that goes into this, and there are a lot of bad questions that like you really need to ask. None of us came out of any frame building courses knowing everything. I made some real goofy mistakes in the first couple bikes where I'm like, I should have known better than that, but you're so overwhelmed with everything. The interview with Anna, I broke down my like original toolkit, and it was a torch, a hacksaw, and files. Like that was it. Like I can build a bike with just that. And I think people don't understand that until someone goes, hey, you really don't need that much. Like, a jig was nice, but like even that I was able to like borrow for a little while because I did have a community of people who were able to help me do that. And I think geographically it makes it really hard to like have that space, but I mean, Jackie in Portland, like you have people who would use that space if it was available. I don't quite live there, but
I feel actually very grateful to be living in Portland because it is such an epicenter. The kind of heyday of handmade frames in Portland might be a little bit ago, but there are still a lot of amazing builders who have mentored me and who've really committed themselves to also trying to crack open the world to other folks. And so, we may cast older white men as like constantly the poster of just the folks who fill the room, but there are actually people who are behind the scenes going to folks and supporting them. And I mean, I have like a list of folks who I've really leaned on, and it's taught me that, there's like the ultimate author of the bike is the person creating it. Yet it does take a whole community. For me, every bike, if you're asking a million different people a million different questions, you have to ask the right people, because you don't want to go on a Facebook group that's full of a bunch of frame builders who are crotchety and are just going to say, you're asking the question wrong. you know? And
It's mostly
like,
amateurs who don't know how to
Yeah.
answer
Yeah,
that question either.
that's true. Who
There's a
are
lot of
very
bad advice.
self-confident,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Nope, this is the way," and it's like,
It's a
No.
lot. It's like a weird echo chamber of just like negativity and like superiority, but like it's very just like unbridled and strange. And if you're coming in from a different perspective and you're genuinely like you have none of that community at your door and you're just trying to ask a question and you're like, oh, this is, this seems like a resource, and you put it out there and you just get bombarded with all this crap and you're just like, whoa,
There's a
okay,
brick.
that's wild. And I think it's really disappointing though when people try to change the conversation that we're trying to have into like the inclusivity is exclusive. Like this is actually like that's not what we're trying to say. And I know that we say like old white guy like as a phrase, but it's not like that's not what we're saying. And it's just because that's kind of just a generalized picture of the industry and the community. And
We're not offended.
you guys,
The
you're
folks who came to this
center,
are
like,
probably
yeah,
not
that
going
you're
to be
here
offended.
and you want to support us, and that's amazing and incredible. And like you guys doing the work and just being here is critically important as well. So that's 1,000% not what we're trying to say, and it's just so disappointing when that message gets completely lost because it just turns into this finger wagging, like this is what you're saying, and it's not. We're trying to just build a community for everybody and make those little baby steps and bring us all together. And like what Jackie said before is, if you come through kind of the frame building school route, there's this really big gap in that kind of what's next space, and there's not a lot of resources in general. And then if you feel maybe not immediately welcomed anyway, then that just becomes magnified. So I think if we were able to make some sort of community resource, either it be a physical space or an online space, or just know that there's that network there.
Right.
And I think like that's the core of the message is we just want to build that network stronger so it's better for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about all of this and
Yeah.
just like this little bubbling moment that we're having of it starting, because I think it's a lot of feelings that everybody has been having for a long time, but all kind of segmented within themselves. And specifically, like I live in Canada, which is like, it's right there, but it's so far away. And the builder community is so spread out and like extra segmented. So it makes it like, I don't know very many female Canadian builders. So it's just like most of my friends are in the States or other places. So it's just to have that additional resource would be amazing. And I think that's all we're trying to do. So.
I love the idea of a collective too, because we all have a different skill set. And listening to Megan talk about how I didn't realize how long you were doing the hacksaw file deal, and
Broken.
and the strain that puts on your body.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the big reasons that I got into machining, because I had someone open my eyes to the possibilities, and then I'm looking at 20 hours for a lug set with a jeweler saw and some files, and it's like, I love doing this. I think it's really fun and creative, and it's very exciting for me mentally, but I can't it's not sustainable in any way.
Yeah.
It's just not. So if we had a space, or physical or not, where you could leverage what I've got going on and likewise, and I can kind of like help you, I think it would be brilliant. And then when you're not spending all those hours on labor, physical labor,
It's huge.
it frees up so much space for you to do other super exciting things, and things that I would never do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Even just the learning bandwidth of like, okay, I'm gonna get a mill and I'm gonna do all these things, and like I was fortunate in that I fell into owning a mill like 100%. Like it was right place, right time, and like just the learning curve and the time that it takes to like figure out a completely new tool takes money out of my pocket
It
and
does.
like puts my builds back, and
Yeah.
in the long run it helps, but in the short term it's really hard to set aside any extra time. Like if I TIG welded, my hands would probably feel better, but taking the time to like be such a good TIG welder that I'm comfortable with that bike going out into the world, like I don't have that kind of time without putting everything on the back burner, and I need a trust fund for that.
Yeah. I don't have a trust fund.
They're little sugar daddies.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
Please raise
actually
your
a
hand.
great transition because our time is quickly coming to an end, but maybe a challenge if I'd ask you all to think about, this is a community, right? We can start to think about what are the things that this audience, what we can do to kind of, take these values and take some of these lessons and bring it back to their home lives. Any kind of challenges or suggestions?
I think just like showing up and listening is a huge first step, and I hope that grows year over year as well.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where it's like you personally need to make the steps to listen to people who are different than you, and you can not understand those experiences, and you need to go and like check yourself at the door and sit down and just listen. And being able to be listened to and be heard is such a huge thing, and to feel like people are actually listening, I think is something that doesn't happen to us all the time, and when it does, that's a really exciting feeling, and the growth that can come from that is really critical. So like, thank you all for coming and making the step to be there, and we hope that it's that ripple effect where it's like it starts like this, and then you go back to your community and you go back to your community, and it's like those little kind of drops in the bucket. Over time it just gets more and more and more. So I think that it's everybody's responsibility to like listen to what other people are saying, and then take it back to your own space, and then critically really look at who you are and what you can do and what changes you can make to kind of apply that growth in your own personal space and break down those barriers.
I think that kind of speaks to think globally, act locally.
Yeah.
Except that when we act locally, we should also remember that there's not this economy of things that we can strive for, but we can really work from the interpersonal level all the way up to the institutional level, because we need to broaden our scope and really fight on all fronts in that way to push the envelope and push for the change that we want to see. And the more we do that, the more critical mass there is around that, because suddenly you're not the only trans person in the room. Suddenly, like, you feel supported, you feel like you're not just going out on a limb for nothing. So.
How are we doing on time?
I think we're kind of right at the
Do you
hour
want to take
mark.
us to the last slide, just so we can show folks on the map where exactly these amazing frame builders are?
Yes, let's go to the last slide.
Wait, click it again, maybe the...
There we
Yay!
go. 3003.
Yeah, so you all are sharing one giant booth space, right, where you can check out each one of these incredible frame builders' work. And SRAM and Zip is there
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, so components were kind of given, and they built their bikes with our stuff, so come check it out.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful things to see.
And really, we invite everyone to come talk to us. Like, we're hoping that we can start conversations that will help y'all next year.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll be involved in that. I hope that also the board that chooses, or the council that chooses who it is that receives this, puts people into place that are going to kick off that next step of opening it up to folks who might need that extra help.
I'd like to just make a little comment, and that is, again, speaking as an old white guy, don't assume that we're assholes. We can be a great resource. We like everybody. There's people who are willing to help. So,
Yeah.
for me personally,
It's not
I help
everyone,
tons of
though.
people. Excuse me?
It's not everyone, though.
I know, but
the people in this room, I'm sure, I would be able to
Outliers.
But just
have
give
this
us the
conversation.
benefit
Give
of
us
the
a chance,
doubt.
yeah.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay.
It's a great-
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess another thing, I don't want to take the floor, but I teach machine shop in an engineering college, and there's in technology education and engineering education, there's a huge movement afoot for diversity. So I feel like you guys are trying to reinvent the wheel here, but there's an immense community out there that is
Yeah.
doing this. I have lunch sitting across from our director of admissions, and she's fretting over how to get people of color to come,
Yeah.
how to get women to make women and a whole diverse group of people aware that these are opportunities. It's like a cultural thing where we're not given the, they're not given the, culturally, it's this not even put on the plate. Like, do you think about becoming an airline pilot, or do you, becoming an engineer or something? But it's, it's something that's, that our, Western world is not ignoring.
I think that
so
speaks
it's
to
not
like
just
the
the
critical
bike.
mass of it as well, where it takes those little pockets, and that's something that's happening in your community, and that's amazing. But it's kind of that drop in the bucket conversation where we need it to be happening everywhere consistently.
Yeah.
And we know we're not trying to invent the wheel. We're just trying to make that really important and like assertive push in our own community, because we haven't really been seeing it critically happen here. So SRAM has been taking that initiative, and Philly's been taking that initiative to stand up and say, and loudly join that conversation and say that this is a space where this is something that we're working on. And so I think that kind of leads back into everyone needs to take it home and work on it. We're not saying that this is we're doing it, like we're like starting it by any means.
No, my whole point was that there's like a lot of people that are working on this issue outside of the bike industry. I mean, I'm a bike industry lifer, but I also teach in an engineering college, so I'm seeing like this whole other thing where there's people working on this, and the bike industry is a tiny part of technology education and
We just
engineering.
need to connect the dots.
But I'm saying that you guys are like, this is like the Tigris and Euphrates, the very initial germ of like an increased awareness in the bike industry, and we're gonna get thrown out of here.
No, it's just my battery's dying.
I mean, I think that's such an important point, and it's like the industry is starting to open their eyes to recognizing that like not being an asshole is like not enough anymore. That's like let's move beyond that, because
we're out of time, but I just want to make another point. I owned a bike shop for 17 years. I was a commercial wheel builder for 14 years. The bicycle industry sucks as a place to try to make a living. I was, born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I have everything stacked in my favor, and it sucks. So you guys, like, that's kind of my comment earlier. It's like you have, that one little brick and one little brick and one little brick, and it's just like, I don't even know how you could begin to do it. I went and got a job as a teacher. I just gave up.
Thank you. Just one other comment.
The biggest challenge as someone who wants to break into the industry as a builder is finances. So for SRAM to step up and say, we are providing that for you and taking that stress off is huge. The tooling is the other huge expense and the huge barrier. And if we could get companies who make jigs like Anvil step up and say, how about a rental program for jigs, or how about a scholarship program that we offer that you can apply to and be awarded a jig, so you can just do that to make it easier, not just with files and a torch and a hacksaw. So I think more companies stepping up like what SRAM is doing financially is going to be the biggest thing for inviting new people in and having that taken off their shoulders.
So bravo the SRAM.
Yeah.
I get to stand here, represent a whole group of people who, are again out there in the community and making the connections. And so I want to thank the frame builders. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you all for coming and participating. And come see us at booth 3003 and check out these amazing, beautiful machines.
I'd also like to take a second just to thank Anna from Bike Rumor as well.
Thank you. I meant to do that.
Anna's interviews with all the builders are really phenomenal. If you have the time, please check them out. Her excitement for this program and passion for this program as well is super important to it, and it's Inclusivity. So I just want to say thanks so much to her too.
Thank you, Brooke. I meant to do that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.